Be seeing the same content tonight, so the purpose is just to reach a broader audience than would have maybe been available for earlier in the day. So we will be sharing the same content this evening. I'll be sharing about a 30-minute presentation, and then we'll move into a question and answer session. If at any time you have a question, please feel free to type it into the box, and then we'll have some live Q&A and be going through that chat box later on after the presentation. I wanted to give an overview of the congestion management process. We have a team here that's been working closely with the Fayetteville Area Metropolitan Transportation Organization. I wanted to acknowledge the rest of our team. Along with Kittleson, we have RS&H and Creative Visibility, and we have at least 5 team members here tonight on the meeting live to answer your questions and to provide a summary of where we are in the project. So just an overview of the next 30 minutes or so. We'll be giving an overview of the project and then sharing some existing conditions for transportation within the MPO, and then our findings, and then just the next steps of our project and our overall schedule. First of all, what is a congestion management process? This is a federally required 4-year update to transportation congestion management planning. It's required of all metropolitan planning organizations of a certain size, and this is area-wide for the Fayetteville metropolitan area. The focus is on safety and transportation mobility, connectivity and accessibility for all transportation users. So that includes all modes of the transportation system. There's also a goal and objective to provide community feedback, incorporate past studies, as well as new data. And we'll be getting into a lot of the detailed data tonight. The study area for the congestion management process includes 4 counties in the Fayetteville area. So we've got Cumberland, Harnett, Hoke, and Robeson. It includes all of the municipalities that you see here, Fayetteville and its bedroom communities, as well as the Cumberland County portion of Fort Bragg. Some of the project goals and objectives include to enhance the current multimodal transportation system, to support performance measures that have been adopted by the MPO and then state and federal performance measures, coordinating with local stakeholders. We have many stakeholders that have been involved through meetings throughout the project, as well as tonight here online. Stakeholders from the local municipalities, Fayetteville and other towns, as well as county stakeholders, MPO, and then NCDOT division stakeholders as well. Another goal is to develop an implementable solution so that we can develop a project list starting with local input and stakeholder input that we can maximize the possibility of funding through the state or federal processes. A key component of this study and congestion management processes is addressing environmental justice so that we can facilitate a broad, equitable public outreach process. So that's what you all are a part of tonight and throughout the project. Identifying areas for projects that are not just confined to a particular demographic or particular area of the MPO, but looking for those improvements that are really based on broadening that geographic and demographic performance and having projects that touch all areas of the MPO. We want to continue to contextualize the recommendations and prioritize those improvements while considering and really prioritizing those community and historic resources. To give an overview of the project schedule, we kicked off right at the end of May, and we'll be running about 12 months into spring of 2022. We have been working to summarize a great deal of existing conditions data, and you'll see that reflected in the project mapping and results. And over the next few months, we'll be taking your public feedback from you all and incorporating that into our existing conditions deliverables, and then going into the future conditions assessment of the project and the project alternatives and recommendations. So we'll meet with you all again sometime in the spring to share those recommendations and get a final feedback loop before we finalize the plan in late spring 2022. The purpose of tonight's meeting and the public engagement throughout the process is to inform you all of the data and the transportation deficiencies and results, as well as to fill in gaps in that data. It is really adamant that you all are involved in this process and can view the data and tell us, what are we missing? Is there a particular part of the roadway system that is congested that we're not showing in our data? Or is there a particularly important link in the sidewalk, bicycling network that you feel should be included in the plan? That's the type of information that we're really hoping to gather tonight and through the online forum. We have a project website, congestionplan.com. All of the project materials, as well as the public meeting materials, will be archived there, and you can view those at any time through the project in the library. There's also a couple of engagement, interactive types of items on that website. One is an online comment map. And I'll be giving a tutorial of how to use that map here at the end of the session. You just double click on the map to leave a comment, and then you can save your comment on any geographic area of the MPO that you would like. The next piece is the online survey that is really critical that you fill this out as a member of the public if you live within the MPO. It takes about 10 minutes. It has a little bit of demographic information as well as a series of questions about the modes that you take and what frequency you travel within the MPO and what sort of transportation vehicle that you're taking. Also has a few questions about where are the top 3 deficiencies that you see in the transportation network. So do please take about 10-15 minutes to fill that out if you haven't done that already, and we'll be compiling that information with the rest of our existing condition results. So I've got a series of maps up here, and we'll be going through these in the next 20 minutes or so. There's a lot of data to take in, so I will go through it pretty quickly and just bring out the brief highlights here for you all to view. But if you're interested in the details, I'd invite you to view those maps at the project website, and so you can kind of dig into as much as you'd like. We'll start with some demographic information that we pulled from the U.S. Census Bureau or the MPO. A lot of this information can help us contextualize transportation improvements, as well as ensure that the project recommendations are spread throughout the MPO and into areas where there may be critical needs. The first is a summary of zero-car households. And this map just shows you how dense that is along the MPO. As you can see, there are some areas of central Fayetteville, as well as Rayford, and then a few outlying areas where there may be more households without a car. And it's really important to identify these areas because these may have higher needs for pedestrian and bicycle infrastructure, as well as transit service. So we'll be contextualizing a lot of the improvements based on some of the demographic information like this. Population density is another big one. And again, the more people there are in a certain area, the more likely there is to be that additional ridership for transit and demand for the pedestrian and cycling modes. The final demographic information that we're presenting here is employment density. And I realize there are some major employers, even outside of what's shown here in the pink. One is Fort Bragg, and their data is separate from the census data as far as number of employers. So that is a big, we realize that is a big transportation generator, as well as you've got a few industrial developments on the outlying edges of town that are big transportation generators. So those are also some pretty big employers that we will be prioritizing when we look at those transportation improvements. So to summarize, there are a few areas that when we overlay all of this data that may have a higher propensity for transit, pedestrian, and bicycling modes. There are some of these areas in Fayetteville along Murchison Road and downtown along Glensford Drive. but also Spring Lake and Rayford. So there's a really high priority to look at these outlying areas where there may be that additional multimodal transportation demand. So moving on to the next piece of the data that we've collected, it has to do with the pedestrian mode. And I'll start by sharing a list of crash data. This is any crash that involved a pedestrian within the last 14 years or so, all mapped out within the MPO. And we've used this to kind of identify those hotspots and areas where transportation improvements may be more urgent. And this could take the form of additional sidewalk and trail infrastructure to provide a safer environment for pedestrians than just no sidewalk at all or walking in the road, as well as additional crosswalk infrastructure. And with the realization that just painting a crosswalk or just marking a crosswalk may not be appropriate, there may be additional treatments needed at some of these intersection locations and mid-block locations. So those are really the items that we're trying to identify first before we propose any transportation improvements for that pedestrian mode. Again, you'll see the existing trail coverage and sidewalk coverage within town. The green lines here are all the sidewalk within the MPO. The pink being the trails, so those are those paved multi-use paths that people can bike or walk on. And then the final thing that the MPO has really implemented, especially through Fayetteville, is what we call this paved multi-use shoulder. So that takes the form of a narrow bike lane or just a shoulder on the road that folks have been using to walk in lieu of having a sidewalk or other infrastructure there. That's been kind of a unique way to bridge the gaps in some of the pedestrian transportation system here. So we've mapped all of that in hopes of identifying where there may be some gaps. In general, the sidewalk coverage is pretty high in downtown, but lacking in suburban areas. So towns like Hope Mills, Spring Lake, there's not as many sidewalks out there. Many of the major intersections, they lack any marked crosswalks or additional pedestrian treatments. And then we've marked off here the top 10 or so corridors in terms of pedestrian crash frequency. So these, again, are crashes in the past 14 years that have involved a pedestrian. So you see some of the busier corridors here, Ramsey Street, Clipdale Road. All of these, we would want to know, really this is where we want to hear from you. Are there additional corridors or spots where you feel like there may be additional need for pedestrian infrastructure? So I'll move on to the bicyclist mode. And similarly, we've compiled the crash data from the NCDOT system for all of the crashes in the last 14 years or so that have involved a cyclist. And so you see there's a few different corridors now than just looking at pedestrian crashes. Some of downtown stands out. So this has helped us identify really those critical areas where we might be looking at some transportation improvements. The other thing that we've mapped out is something called level of traffic stress. And this is really in reaction to the fact that people are not going to be cycling on a roadway where they don't feel comfortable. So crash data on that given roadway may not be as high just because there's not a lot of demand because people don't feel safe cycling there. So this is really an attempt to quantify that information and map out where there may be barriers to what we call a low stress bicycling network. The green lines that you see here are some of the major corridors that are less stressful and they might attract more cyclists, whereas the red and orange, those are the barriers where really no one is going to want to cycle on a very high volume, high speed road. So again, it's all a network analysis where we'll be looking at how can we maximize travel within the NPO if you're on a bike. So someone had asked something about bicycle level of service. That's a great question. Bicycle level of service has a different set of data that it relies on, and it is predominantly based on facilities that may have more bike volume. So the bicycle level of traffic stress is really meant to capture those facilities where there's not a lot of bicycle demand right now, there may not be that much crash data because there's just not a lot of cyclists using the facility. So that level of traffic stress is really aimed to quantify just how much of the cycling population might be comfortable riding on any given route. So thank you for that question. With that said, we've overlaid all of this information and identified about the top 10 corridors here with the highest bicycle crash frequency, where there might be some areas to prioritize those improvements. So you see those here, and again, we would want to know from you if there are others. So moving on to the transit mode, you see we are kind of visiting all the different transportation modes here in town. I mapped out here where the transit service is within the MPO. That's currently the fixed route service is through FAST, so only within the Fayetteville city limits. You can see here that it covers most major corridors. However, most of those routes only serve a 60-minute headway, so they come once each hour. So we're really wanting to hear from you what routes or what corridors might there be additional demand so that you may need additional frequency in those bus routes? What corridors are not served? I've thrown a few of them up here. And then what areas of the MPO may have that transit ridership, that transit demand beyond Fayetteville, so that we can explore the need for additional transit service to those routes. So getting into the driving mode, which you'll see most of the mapping information is presented for the automobile mode, but by no means is this the most critical mode in our plan. We just have a lot more data on automobiles, so I'll be sharing that in the form of several different maps here, and we'll get into the weeds, hopefully not too far in the weeds. Obviously, we have a very large area with 4 counties, and we're not able to look at every intersection by intersection when it comes to looking at things like traffic congestion. So we boiled it down to about 48 major study corridors. So these are the major roads: Ramsey Street, Cliffdale Road. This project stakeholders have helped us identify that list and narrow them down for purposes of looking at a few different data sets. We look at travel time. We'll talk about what reliability means. We'll look at delay, which is that extra time that you spend waiting in traffic on these roads. We'll be looking at hotspots, which are those major intersections where you have the most crash data and also additional delay. So first of all, I'll be providing reliability is a really big performance measure now for the federal level. They require all MPOs to provide travel time reliability measures within the MPO. And so what you can think of this is you leave for work in the morning on Monday and it takes you 20 minutes, but on Wednesday it takes you 30 minutes. And it may never get below 20 minutes, but it's really that differential between, you need to add 10 minutes of extra time just to make sure you get to work on time if there's traffic. So that's really what that reliability is boiling down to. What's that extra planning time that you need in your travel time to make sure you get to your destination on time? Corridor delay is something we look at. It's that additional time you need that you're just spending waiting in traffic. And so obviously very important performance measure when we're looking at prioritizing those transportation improvements. So getting into the mapping here, we mapped out for all 48 of those corridors where there may be some issues with travel time reliability and delay. I'm showing you here for the afternoon rush hour, weekday afternoon peak. And we have AM data as well up on the project website, but for now, afternoon is more interesting. So I'll leave it to just that. You can see here we've getting darker and darker along the corridors. You'll see that's more and more planning time into that commute, into that reliability, getting up into the 20% or more. Those major corridors like Skybow Road, NC 59 through Hope Mills, Ramsey Street. These are the ones you know of that, these are the major contributors to delay. But we want to know from you, are there other corridors on here where you feel like are not standing out on our maps, where there may be additional congestion? Also looking at delay, again, this is the time that you spend waiting in traffic. We have averaged that by mile just to be able to compare one corridor with the next, because the longer the corridor, the more delay you're going to have if you travel the length of it. You can see here the dark red is the corridors with more than a minute of delay per mile. That's about as bad as it gets. And you can see Highway 24, Highway 87 coming in from Spring Lake, also down up through Hope Mills, and Highway 401 east and west of town, all the really high delay corridors. Another piece of data that we looked at was what we call hotspots, and this is something that we assign a letter grade to every intersection. It's like school. It goes from A to F, F being the worst, and we're really looking at that level of service E and F as those intersections where there's the most problems with delay and congestion. So you can see here the orange and yellow dots are the intersections with those failing levels of service. The black dots on here are other intersections that we looked at that may not be as congested. But if you feel like there are some that we missed, needed to fill in a few of the gaps, please let us know in that survey, and we can make sure that that is incorporated in our data. And finally, we looked at crash data through the NCDOT database. This time we're just looking at 5 years, and we've got all modes. So if something involved a pedestrian or a cyclist, it's also included in this map, as well as just automobile to automobile crashes. And we've highlighted all of the locations with 50 or more crashes within that 5-year span. And so you can see, the higher the volume, the more crashes you're going to have. But some of the major study corridors stand out here, again, along Skybow Road and along Rayford Road, a couple of the other ones, Ramsey Street, even getting into Rayford. So again, these are the locations that we're going to concentrate our efforts on through the remainder of the study. These and the other ones we've identified on the previous slides. And if there are other locations where you feel like we need to focus our efforts, please let us know in the coming weeks or so through filling out that survey, and we can include those. So just to aggregate all of our driving conditions results into top 10 to 15 corridors, you see those shown here. This is where we'll be focusing our efforts. Not to mention that a lot of these have been programmed for improvements and may already be funded through NCDOT. So we'll be comparing our list with their list just to make sure that we're not duplicating those efforts. So just to summarize, there are several major corridors with cascading effects here, not only for the automobile mode where you have traffic congestion, but typically if it's bad for one mode, it may be for the others as well. So those corridors where we're seeing a lot of travel time reliability issues or delay issues, those are having a lot of high crash locations. That may be barriers to biking and walking. They may not have transit service or very reliable transit service. So again, we're looking at this from a multimodal lens for prioritizing those improvements. We're going to address key gaps in the pedestrian and bicycle network with the acknowledgement that there may not be a chance to provide a sidewalk everywhere, but looking at where those gaps are so that you have a safe crosswalk over some of these major corridors, and you can connect to those different pockets and those different neighborhoods and be able to travel across the city without a car. Again, transit service, looking for ways to expand that beyond just Fayetteville, looking for areas to provide additional frequency of service, high frequency routes, and encourage a higher ridership. So looking for those areas that have maybe a higher potential ridership. So the next steps of the project, we'll be compiling your feedback here over the next couple of weeks and then producing an existing conditions memorandum that will include all of the data that you see here, as well as your feedback. We'll be putting that together over the next month or so. The next phase of the project will focus not on existing conditions, but on future conditions. We will be forecasting traffic volumes into the future about 20 years. We'll be looking at changes in land use throughout the MPO, where there might be some additional developments. And we'll be proposing a few recommendations for each of the corridors, looking at things like providing changes to traffic signal control, additional crosswalks, additional bicycle facilities, and then maybe more lanes, maybe fewer lanes. Someone mentioned earlier today that they asked about how does the outer loop affect our conclusions and the completion of the 295 Beltway around Fayetteville. In some cases, that could create some additional bottlenecks around that loop. And in some cases, it could reduce traffic along a few roads within the city. So there may be some opportunity to reprioritize some of the roadway width to other users, such as cycling and walking. So all of those things will be included in our detailed analysis in the coming months. And then the hope is to provide another feedback loop with you all sometime in the spring, maybe around March, to have another public meeting like this one, where we share those results, we share some preliminary alternatives, and we get your feedback on those before we finalize. So, like I said, we'll be wrapping up the plan over the next 8 months or so. And if you have not already visited the project website, please provide your feedback there. View the project mapping information. We'll be posting one of the 2 virtual meetings today in a recorded form on that website, as well as all of the project comments that we received from you all. So please provide anything that you'd like to ask a question about. Please feel free to type that into the chat box, or we can recognize you if you'd like to speak. And with that said, really appreciate everybody's time here in the evening. And I'll be around along with the project stakeholders. We'll be hanging out until about 7 o'clock. We can do another tutorial through the project website for those of you that want to stick around. But other than that, that concludes the formal presentation, and we'll be around for questions. Thank you. So for those that may not have seen the quick tutorial of the website earlier, I did want to share that again. It's a great looking website, and I really commend our team member, Lisa from Creative Visibility, for putting this together. You can see the virtual meeting website here. First of all, congestionplan.com is what you want to go to. You'll see the details, and if you scroll all the way down, you can flip through all the maps one by one, either on your computer or on your phone. And you can click on the maps. You can zoom in and out. There's also a download link through the project library. So right here, all the maps have been posted there as well. You can download the high resolution versions. The really important things here for getting feedback from you all is the public comment map. And I see there's a lot of comments on here, which is great. Great to see that folks have left their comments today or maybe over the weekend. If you would like, if you're a geographically oriented person like I am, and it's easier for you to share something on the map, just zoom in and on whatever intersection or whatever corridor you like to comment on. Maybe it's this roundabout at Camden Road and Cumberland Road. You want to tell us, how much you really like that roundabout. You're welcome to make your comment on that. Just to click here when it pops up in the prompt, and you can type your comment here, and then you don't have to leave your name and email. If you do, we'll sign you up for our listserv, but you don't have to, and then just create a comment. Someone asked how long the website will be active for. The website itself, I believe we will keep active through the duration of the project, which will last all the way until next May or June. As far as when to leave your feedback for this go-round, we'll be pulling a final round of comments, likely sometime near the end of next week, just to make sure folks have enough time. After that, you're still welcome to leave your comments and take the survey. It just may or may not make it into our existing conditions report and be considered in our project alternatives. So there will be another round of feedback and another survey when we get into March. So there'll be another chance for you to comment if you haven't already. Speaking of the survey, just wanted to bring that up one more time to encourage everybody to do that. You'll see the survey here. There's some demographic information that Federal Highway has requested that we provide just to make sure that we have good coverage of all of the residents of the MPO. And then there's some questions about how often you take each form of transportation every week. So not just to work, but for any trip. And then there'll be some call out boxes here to leave some comments about your top 3 locations for improvements for biking and walking or any other mode. So it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to complete. You can also access any of our social media outreach. It seems like there have been thousands and thousands of folks that have been reached by these already. So you can take a look at that. And then we'll be posting additional meetings again back in the spring. You can sign up to receive notifications via email so that you don't have to just come back here and monitor the website. You can get notified when there are changes. And if you have any sort of direct feedback or questions, you're welcome to contact me or the others listed at this contact link. I'll throw my information back up there. And again, we'll be hanging out again for about 25 minutes or so. If you have any questions, feel free to ask those. Otherwise, we're not going to be going through any other additional meeting content now, so you're free to leave if you have no questions. So I know we still have a few members of the community that are still on. It appears to be mostly stakeholders at this point. While I've got the stakeholders on, just wanted to quickly touch on project schedule. We have set up a progress meeting with the NPO for this Friday, and I know some of the technically detailed oriented stakeholders have been attending those meetings. So if I didn't copy you on that, we can forward you a link to that. And I don't know, Lisa, if you have a chance or if you're ready, but Lisa shared just a summary of who we had reached at our earlier meeting today. I didn't know, Lisa, if you have a minute to comment on any updates to that.
So let me pull up my stats.
Sure.
Let me just take a quick check. So,
Yeah.
so far we've had 58 responses to the survey and 27 subscribers and about 21 comments on the maps. We haven't had any additional surveys since this meeting started. Perhaps people already filled them out or they're waiting. That'll stay up, as you already mentioned. So far today, we've had quite a few hits to the website. Let me pull that up real quick because that has been updated. There is a little bit of a lag for those stats, but currently that's 89. And earlier today, it was only 59. So we've had quite a few hits today. That was actually after the presentation. 59 was after the presentation, and now we have 89. So we've had 30 more hits since this meeting started. Facebook and Instagram, we've had 14,000 plus sponsored reach. That means with ads that were geo-targeted to the Fayetteville area with an 18-mile radius from the city center, all adults 18 to 65, over 65. With more impressions than that, 19,000 plus impressions. That means might have hit the same person more than one time. And then let's see, that's we've got a few followers for Instagram. We have 11 and 22 Facebook page likes that like the page. We've reached almost 2,800 Instagram accounts just since June 30th. We're also on Twitter. So can you guys hear me? I just realized my mic was set aside.
Yes.
I'm so sorry if I was unable to be heard, and if I need to repeat something, let me know. Our Twitter has organic reach, means unpaid. 427 accounts have been reached with 882 profile visits, people who visited our Twitter page. Only 2 followers, but a lot of people don't follow Twitter, but might come up in their feed. So that's generally where we stand with some of the stats. They're interesting to me. I like stats, but if there's any specific questions, I would be happy to answer those.
Thank you, Lisa. Hopefully we'll see an uptick and comments will start to roll in after these meetings. And I did receive the recording for the first one, and I can send that to you, Lisa. We can work to get that updated and put on the website.
Perfect. I'll also send out a reminder to the folks that have subscribed that the recording is up in case they were not able to make it to the live meeting.
Great. Thank you. Like I said, I will be here until 7. In case there is anyone that would like to pop in and ask a question. Again, don't expect we don't expect to cover any additional content beyond what's been provided here.
Also, if I might add, if any of the stakeholders or actually anybody who might be listening, if you guys would be willing to forward one of the emails that I sent out about signing up, or just ask people to go to the homepage and sign up, take the survey, email your neighbors, friends. There's an app called Next Door Neighbor. If any of you are on that, they'll allow you, because it's your own neighborhood, they'll allow you to send that information so that people can have their voice heard. If any of the stakeholders or anyone on the call could please share that information, that would be a good way to reach more folks.
All right, about 7 o'clock. Appreciate everybody's participation, and with that, I'll close it out. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Zach.
Right.
Good night.
Good night.